And keep in mind, this isn't a matter of evil people doing evil things. This is a matter of systemic corruption, because the system itself is geared towards corrupting those who participate, and corrupts them in a very subtle ways. They start believing certain assumptions, right? What's good for Wall Street is good for the broader economy, that without these ways of doing things, we wouldn't be successful, or we wouldn't produce growth, or whatever. So it's not as if bankers are evil. Most of the people who work at banks are really nice people. They're really smart people, and I've worked with many of them, and they're really nice. But if you put them in a system that encourages the worst of human behavior, and that's how you get the bonuses, and that's how you keep your job, people gradually start rationalizing, and they rationalize and rationalize and rationalize and become part of the system. And no better than senior executives or managing directors at Goldman Sachs. I mean, they can't see the forest for the trees.
Right. Yeah, it's been indoctrinated. I know, I grew up in that culture since I was 21, 22. I went to Wall Street, I got handed the phone, and for the next 6 months, I got shown how it was done. Part of that included, we try to, rip as much money out of every trade as possible. That's what you try to do. That is the mentality of Wall Street, and maybe any other capitalist system, but there, it just can get really out of hand really quickly. And risk-taking as well. I mean, banks started off as institutions to hold deposits.
Right.
And in the 70s, like you said, in 80s, they morphed into these casinos.
Well, it was the Glass-Steagall Act.
Yeah.
It was repealed by Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
and that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, and that made it even worse. But before that, people were taking these balance sheets and just putting these huge bets, because that just seemed to be the convenient place to do it at the time. Oh, this is the bank, has all these bonds. Well, let's quadruple up and see what happens next. And when I was there, you got paid an annual bonus on how much you made. Now, if you lost a lot of money, you might get sacked, and then you'd go work for Bear Stearns. And then if you made a lot of money, you would get a chunk of it. And so it's in your interest to take a lot of risk.
Right.
And so that's, like you said, the way people grew up.
It's systemic corruption. It's corruption through the system, through a system of perverse incentives. And no one is impervious to that. It's not a matter of individual failing of morality. It's that the system is geared towards producing these outcomes. And as long as you don't change the set of incentives and organizational structure, these are the outcomes that will be produced. And the regulators are part of the same system that produces these outcomes, and nothing changed. The Great Depression of 2008 is still ongoing. And if you want to check with the new Secretary of the Treasury, the first question they should ask them is, how's the economy going? And if they say the economy is growing and improving every day, they are completely out of touch with what's really happening in people's lives. Because the people who elected Trump would say the economy is a complete mess, right? Why? Because there's two economies. There's two economies. There's the economy that the hedge funds live in, because these aren't even banks anymore, they're hedge funds. And then there's the economy that everyday people live in all of the Midwestern states that elected Donald Trump, or that screamed for Brexit, or that are going to maybe elect Marine Le Pen in France, or, these are people who are still suffering 8 years later. With enormous increases. They look at the papers, and the papers say, we have no inflation. The inflation rate is low. Really? If you exclude food, energy, and healthcare, and the cost of rent. Are you kidding me? So if you exclude, living, breathing, getting sick, and living somewhere, and eating, sure, there's no inflation. But real people, that's 80% of their paycheck, and that's been increasing at double digits. So, this discrepancy between this bubble that the hedge funds live in and the real world is enormous.